Hey, Kelly.
Hey guys,
What's up, Kelly?
it's Bob Litchfield's on the line here too. I apologize. I'm mobile. I'm on the road today. I don't know if
Yeah,
Kelly's
yeah, yeah.
joining us or not.
We can hear you. Is that
Okay,
perfect?
Thank you, Bob, for
great.
calling in. Mobile
Yeah.
is great.
Oh, hey Kelly,
Hello,
how are you?
Tiger. Hello, Chris.
How's it going, Kelly?
Good. Hello, Dinesh.
Dinesh is coming in, and then Andrea is double booked. So you want probably won't talk about IP much today.
Okay. All right. Well, I just got back from a joint preservation conference in Warsaw, Poland, yesterday.
Oh, wow.
And
The other Warsaw.
what's that?
The other Warsaw. Yeah,
The other Warsaw. Yeah. When you say Warsaw, people assume
I
you're
know.
talking about
Yeah.
Warsaw, Indiana, in orthopedics and spine. But anyway, there was really a lot of enthusiasm about MPFL this year. Last year, the excitement was all around lateral extra-articular tenodesis, LET procedure, and there's still excitement around that, but there was significant interest around MPFL. Um, should I go ahead and start? I have a little bit of a presentation prepared.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, please.
All right. Sorry, Bob, if you're on the phone, but I haven't reviewed this with Bob ahead of time. And Bob, if you have some information, especially on procedure volumes and that kind of thing, please chime in. I'm going by some estimates here.
Great.
Let's see here. Okay. So this is fairly short. It's like 9 slides. And I don't really have like, a verified proposal here. These are sort of back of the envelope calculations
Perfect.
because I've been at this conference for a week. It was like the very next thing I did after meeting with you all last week, or I guess we met before that, but I've been there for a week, and I presented on two topics from an engineering perspective, which was really an interesting thing to do. And everyone else at the Congress was orthopedic surgeons, and it's kind of a group of, I'd say, uh, not radical, but sort of off the chart kind of orthopedic surgeons in Europe. And for example, one surgeon has developed a method, a technique for doing like a 10-minute total hip replacement. And but most of the everything we talked about at this conference was sports medicine related, and they like to refer to it as joint preservation techniques. Um, let's see here. So again, we're talking about the NotchLok device as a potential solution for some surgeries around the knee, such as ACL reconstruction, and in particular MPFL reconstruction. And I did a little background looking at potential predicates, and one set of predicates that I kind of like is the Smith and Nephew system, because it's a peak interference screw and a peak sheath. And these are, of course, cleared by FDA. Um, it's it's kind of interesting. The peak interference screw is already cleared for MPFL. I looked up the indications for use, and the specific indication is for reattachment of ligament, tendon, soft tissue, or bone during cruciate ligament reconstruction of the knees. All screws with a diameter of 9 millimeters or less and 25 millimeters or less long are also indicated for ACL, PCL, and extracapsular repairs such as MCL, LCL, POL, patellar realignment, which is what MPFL is, and tendon repairs, including IT band tenodesis. So the the peak screw is already offered in a 6 millimeter size and has the indications for use that we'd be looking for.
Hey, Ken. This is Dinesh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So one more thing I like to add, based on my personal experience from Friday, I had a meniscus root repair. So they used a Arthrax on me. I think it was Arthrax. I don't know exact implant and waiting for the sizes and all that. But I don't know if that would be something you wanted to look into, because I think meniscus root repair, as I was kind of reading and researching upon, has been largely like left out. I mean, so common,
Yeah.
especially with all the pickleball injuries. And mine is not pickleball related, but anyway, I was just wanted to kind of throw it out there, something that you wanted to look into as
Yeah. Yes,
indication.
that could be a potential procedure as well. I hadn't thought about that in the context of this. I have thought about that in the past as a procedure for NotchLok, and I think there could be some application there for sure. I don't think I see it. Let's see, extra. I don't see it listed here, but we could research that as a potential indication also.
Yeah,
Most of that market is either button and now all suture-based anchors. Arthrex just came out with a new knotless, all suture-based root repair system. So I do think the
Yep.
market's sort of heading that way, but I think it might be an alternative to tying over a button, which is right now probably the main alternative.
Yep. So I think what Bob is saying, part of the significance of that is in maybe 5 and 10 years ago, meniscus root repair was or replacement was done almost like an interference screw type replacement, where you had a bone block at each end and you used an interference screw to secure it into place. And what I believe Bob is saying is now most of those procedures are done with suture repair.
So they're pulling the root of the tendon into a
Into a socket,
into a socket, and
but
okay.
using a button
Yeah.
as fixation.
And is it so one of the things, because Kelly, we were looking at that for Suture Concepts at one point, right?
Yeah.
Having it be tensionable, right?
Yeah.
Is that sorry to get off topic, but is that something that you could put inside this screw, is some sort of one-way tensionable device, right? So you start, without any tension, and you can pull it down to get the best anatomical repair.
I mean, I think that's
Very
Like a
small.
boat cleat almost. Yeah.
that's possible. Let's see, did I leave that? I had a slide. It depends. So the device we have the most experience with is this device. We've
Yeah.
done, and I'm showing Bob the traditional fixation device that we worked on and used in over a dozen cadaver labs. This particular device is probably not that great for tensioning, because
Yeah.
you introduce the soft tissue into the socket and then you apply the screw over the soft tissue. When you start applying the screw into the socket, the length is already fixed at that point.
Yeah.
I mean, we have our other IP, which I took the picture out of the presentation. We have our other IP that's this device with like an eyelet at one end.
Yeah.
And that's what that one is for.
Yeah.
Is to be able to tension it.
Yeah.
But we don't have a lot of experience with that concept yet.
Yeah.
We've only done one cadaver lab with that. I mean, it did work. But with that concept, we for sure could do tensioning.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't want to get us off track, but
That's okay. That's a good
municipal
question.
root repair,
It's a good
with
question. Yep.
slight modification could be an interesting market too. Yeah.
Yep.
As an indication, there's big growth in it. I think it's been an under-recognized problem. We have at least 10% of ACLs have lateral meniscal root. So that's about the numbers in our large randomized trial, about 10% of cases. So if you look at the ACL numbers alone in the U.S. is 600,000. So
Yeah.
you should have 60,000 root repairs, just that market, and that's not the degenerative root repairs. That's the medial side. So there is a market there for sure.
Yeah.
And Bob, is it fair to say that historically they've just left it unaddressed or snipped and not bothered with it?
Yeah, but everyone now is paying attention to roots and understanding that that biomechanically to have a root tear is essentially like having a total meniscectomy, essentially.
Yeah.
Bob, does a sports medicine surgeon that does arthroscopy, is adding the bone tunnel a big deal, or that is no big deal for meniscal root repair with the tunnel?
Yeah.
I think in many ways it's easier to fix than a lot of meniscal tears, to be honest, because the tools are a little bit more familiar for those that do ACLs. So putting a guide pin up and creating a pathway and then using antegrade suture passers. So there's a few steps involved, but I think it's pretty straightforward, to be honest.
And what about the healing rate? Because that one of the big problems with meniscus is the different zones for vascularity. I would assume a root tear has a better chance of healing because you're introducing healing factors, but because of the tunnel, right?
Yes, you do, and it's also the demographic is young. So this is the ACL population.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the lateral meniscal root is young, healthy people, so they have a high rate of healing. The medial meniscal root tears are older, degenerative, sometimes insidious at onset, and probably just a precursor to arthritis. But a lot of guys are still fixing them and giving them a chance to try to heal, even though they're 50 years old. So it's two different pathways. But the young ACL related ones have high healing rates.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then just a little bit more detail on the, if you'll bear with me, on the indications for use. The sheath, on the other hand, the sheath is indicated only for fixation of soft tissue during cruciate ligament reconstruction. And I think that is significant in terms in the eyes of the FDA. So when you go look at the Smith and Nephew, this little picture here is from the Smith and Nephew MPFL brochure. They're using their PEEK screw, but they're not using the sheath with it. So I thought that was interesting. The PEEK screw is indicated for cruciate ligaments and surrounding ligaments, but the sheath is only indicated for cruciate ligament repair. So we might, I don't know how big of a regulatory hurdle that would be to to design a system specifically for MPFL, and then it could be as simple as our predicate is just the PEEK screw, and the secondary predicate is the sheath, because there's really no direct predicate for something like NotchLok. So we'd be relying on biomechanical testing to say it's equivalent. So anyway, I just wanted to point out there is a little hole there in the indications for use for the sheath.
What?
Kelly, just sorry to interrupt you. What about systems that involve a screw with essentially a washer concept? So where there are systems where the screw acts as an interference screw, but there's a washer to fix the graft at the orifice of the tunnel. So that's probably a predicate device, but it probably isn't. I don't know if that was developed in PEEK. It certainly was in metal.
It is in PEEK. Diffuse Synthes has that in PEEK. I actually didn't think to look at that, but if I'd have to go back and research that. I don't want to go looking it up right now. But if we found out that is used for extra-articular ligament repair, which it would be, right? If that indication includes extra-articular, then that might actually be a better predicate.
Yeah.
So that's a really good possibility. That's a really good.
Just stop calling it a sheath.
Yeah.
Nomenclature gets you a long way.
Well, I mean, what I'm hearing over the last 5 minutes is there's plenty of predicates. So this is going to be a class 2 with probably a lot of mechanical data,
Yeah.
but no clinical data, hopefully.
That's what I'm thinking too. And anybody I talk to about ACL devices, I don't think many of them are requiring animal data. They're mostly requiring mechanical testing.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful too.
Yeah.
So then the next slide is a little bit about the proposed solution. So if we were to go this route of MPFL instead of a whole suite of instruments and implants for ACL, um, that would probably be like an ideal candidate for a single-use sterile kit
Yeah.
because
Yes.
and then we would also include with that, um, we'd need to design and release a couple standard suture anchors because they're quite not always, but they're quite commonly used for MPFL repair, where you suture anchor the graft at two locations to the patella, and then you tension it over with a very slight amount of tension, and then anchor it to the femur. So, but it would be a really neat single-use kit containing the NotchLok screw, two suture anchors, and then the punch drills, notchers, and drivers for instruments.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're big. I mean, the kit is a really good business model.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because then
especially, yeah.
it might be a really big inroad to ASCs, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where everything's going. I mean, Chris can talk about this, but people are done with autoclave trays, and things get dull. You can't find things. They're dirty.
Yep.
Everything's going to single-use kits, especially, I mean, and then you could also have different kits for different procedures. So you end up with different products that are kind of almost the same, MPFL, ACL, and
MCL.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so now I kind of made up some numbers here, so I'm not going to try to BS you, but I'm thinking that if you had
Higher.
a primary, your ligament fixation device, which would be NotchLok, and two uh, suture anchors, and then the instruments in a sterile kit. Tell Chris, maybe you maybe have the most relevant experience with this, but I mean, would that be an ASP of in that range of like 1,000 to 1,500 or something like that?
I
Or
mean, I mean, Bob can answer this, but I think the market can tolerate, particularly because it's kitted, a much higher price point.
is that right?
2,000 to 2,500.
Okay. Okay.
I agree.
Potentially,
Yeah. Well,
particularly if there's three implants in there, right? Two suture anchors and
Yeah,
a
it'd be three
and a
implants.
screw. I think you can go higher.
All right.
I mean, the cost is going to be, I mean, depending on how creative we want to get with the packaging. I mean, if you want to work back, right? If you want a 70+% margin on it, you gotta, I think, have a little higher price point to give you
Yep. Yep.
some latitude on on the shelf sterile cost.
Yeah. Yeah. Just
yeah.
gonna update.
And what's nice about a kit too, to some degree, is it's a little more expensive from a packaging standpoint, but you're doing one sterilization validation. You're not doing a bunch of them.
Yep.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of mass in the kit, so
Yeah,
it should pass easily. Yeah.
yeah,
Yep. Because one of the advantages of MPFL is, you don't, there would be no big guides. Thered be
yeah,
no ligament tensioning platform. I mean, an ACL is like two pretty good sized, full sized autoclave kits.
yeah, for
And
sure.
and I think we could make all this stuff for MPFL just fit in a little kit about the size of this sample image I grabbed off from ECA's website.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I mean, just with the kits too, it's going to get uh more important for the OEMs to provide kits because the large OEMs come in with 7 trays, and
Hmm.
they come into the OR, and it's not cheap. I mean, sterilization is a significant expense, the autoclave for these
Yep.
ASCs, and with the private equity guys, focusing on cost. If you come in with a kit and you don't have to go into the autoclave at all, I mean, that's
Yeah.
gonna really like that, and they'll pay more for it on a per piece basis because they don't have all the overhead
Okay.
for
Kelly,
sterilization.
can I just make a point on one addition to the kit?
Absolutely. Yes.
I would include a guide which can be disposable, and the guide gives you the offset from the posterior cortex to Schottle's point, because it's actually a fairly slippery point to find, and you need fluoro and you need a trocar tip drill to stay on the spot. But
Hmm.
I think an offset guide that references off the posterior medial cortex would be very helpful. I've been thinking of trying to develop that as a standalone, but if it was part of a kit, I think that would be a nice addition.
So it's basically a guide to measure from posterior cortex.
Yeah, posterior cortex just anterior, so you can get to Schottle's point very easily. And if it was radiolucent, you could use your fluoro. You could know that your target is exactly at Schottle's point, and then boom, put in your fixation.
Fantastic. Okay. Yeah, the hot shots I was visiting last week, of course, they all just do it. They do everything from high tibial osteotomy to ACL just by eyeballing it. But I don't necessarily think that's a good idea. You need the stuff in the kit that's going to encourage maybe a new user to want to adopt it.
Yeah, I mean, we have
Yeah,
to
I don't
shoot
think.
for not the hot shots doing it, right?
Right.
We've got to make this, lowest common denominator
Exactly. Yep.
usable.
So
Yep.
good. I've added that in, Bob, to the slide.
Yeah,
Okay, so there's that. I tried. Here's where Bob, I think, could give me some good estimates, which I didn't have a chance to ask him in advance of this meeting. One thing that was presented at this conference was injury rates for high school and college athletes. They were basically referencing published studies, but they were talking about the number of MPFL cases they're seeing, and patellofemoral injuries don't always result in an MPFL procedure, but they're seeing a lot of high school and college age MPFL injuries taper off real quick after people leave their 20s. And I asked a number of them. I said, okay, for every 20 patients you see with a patellofemoral injury, how many of them would end up receiving MPFL? And one person, Peter Verdonk, I'm sure you know him, Bob.
Yep, I know
He
Peter.
said he
Yeah.
said if somebody comes in with a patella dislocation, which is one type of PFI, one type of patellofemoral injury, he said almost everybody, all of those patients are going to get uh, an MPFL procedure. And then some people said in general, anybody presenting with patellofemoral injury, they would say, 5 to 10 out of 20. So let's say 25 to 50% of them would probably end up getting an MPFL. So I went and grabbed some data about numbers of high school athletes and college athletes and rates of injury per athletic exposure. And I just with a simple Excel spreadsheet, I came up to with 10,000 to 20,000 procedures per year. And I bet, Bob, you can tell me off the top of your head if that's even close.
I think you're underestimating, to be honest. Like if
Okay.
the baseline, I think if you use ACL as your reference, I use the number 600,000, but it's
Yep.
growing every year, as you know.
Yep.
I think it's certainly a lot higher percentage than that. Like if I look at my own practice, probably for every ACL, every 10 ACLs, I would do at least 3 MPFLs. So in that
Really?
range.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a big number. And I think what's changed is not the incident rate hasn't really changed. It's just the thought process is after your second patellar instability episode, you need an operation. So I'm sure there's some doing it after first-time dislocators, but historically these were treated non-operatively, and these kids languished out there with multiple recurrences. They wore braces, and they end up with bad patellofemoral joints. And now the word is out that these need to be stabilized early. And so it's a little bit like shoulder instability. After, 2 strikes, you're out, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the rate is going to grow based on really the key opinion leaders talking about early stabilizations.
Okay. I mean, should we estimate at this point, something more in the hundreds of thousands, like 200,000 to 300,000 per year?
I think it would be 100,000
Yeah.
Okay.
U.S. market.
Okay.
Definitely going to help with the business plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding. I knew you'd have a good estimate for that, Bob. The folks I was talking with did not have that kind of information. They kind of know what they see. But as far as like demographics and stuff, that's not really up there on their.
Put down, hey, Kelly, write down next to that, 1/6 of ACLs is kind of the
Oh,
math.
what did you say, Bob? Did you say? I thought you said.
Yeah, I said 30%, but I think 1/6 is a pretty good estimate. I
Okay,
can probably
okay,
get you a little bit more
1/6
accurate data.
to
The
one.
problem without current kits, or that most of the implant industry doesn't know what the indication was. So we'd have to get some billing data maybe to find out actually what are these implants used MPFL versus other indications. So
Yeah. And I think that was what I gathered at this conference too, that the word was out that, these patients need to be treated after when they see, a patella dislocation or subluxation multiple times in a row.
It sounds
absolutely.
like in the US, this procedure is going to just keep growing. It gives surgeons another procedure to do early. It's almost kind of preventative, but
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
all the vectors are pointing in the right direction so far.
Yep.
And I would make the option that the kit would be graft friendly. So if you want to use a gracilis tendon graft or an allograft, or you could use synthetic, because I think you're going to see the market shift towards internal bracing, or a BioPiece is out now, which is owned by ConMed, which is a collagen augmented that it is now people are using for MPFL. So I think the platform should be agnostic to whatever you want to use as your graft, whether it be synthetic or be tissue.
Yeah, in fact, the cadaver demo they did was done by Lars Blond from the UK, and he said he does all synthetic bracing now. He does not even use a soft tissue graft for MPFL, and he got questioned by other people asking if he had problems with that. Problems might include, one person said sometimes they make noise, like a clicking noise. Sometimes there, is abrasion with the other tissues. And Lars said he does not see that. He said he's done hundreds of them using synthetic material. And so that is, I think, graft choice is also very important here.
Are those synthetic grafts? Are they? Is it like a rope or a tape?
It's not like a braided. Some of them are called tapes, but
Okay.
they're usually a braided fiber, like almost like a textile.
Yeah, it's a tape.
Yeah, that was BioRes, right? With that was Kevin. Kevin's company.
Kevin Rocco.
Kevin Rocco's company. Yeah.
So he sold that out. I was involved with Kevin on that company. So that's it's basically a collagen with PLLA woven into it. It gives it some volume and gives it some time zero strength. But it's pretty expensive, to be honest, for that indication. If a simple suture tape works as well. So, but I think you can let other people debate what they want to use. But as long as the system allows you to use whatever they want to use.
Yep.
Yeah, the case they did, yeah. So I would say including tapes and um, fiber braces.
Yeah.
The case they did in this lab was the Arthrex. They used the Arthrex, the wide, same thing they use for rotator cuff repair.
Yeah, the tape. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fiber tape. It's
Yeah.
yeah, they call it in that whole system. They've sort of brand the platform internal bracing, which is really augmenting soft tissues. But some people are using it as a standalone, and it was particularly an extra articular. You wouldn't use that for an ACL, for example, but an extra articular MPFL, you probably can get away with just a tape alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I think, well, my next slide was steps in the project, but let's let's jump to the fun part. So let me update my estimates here. So if we actually did 100,000 cases, oh wait, no, I'm not at 100% market share the first year. Let's say, and I'm just taking some swags here, so bear with me. Has anybody got their calculator handy?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Actually, I can plug it into the spreadsheet. Unfortunately, the Microsoft project spreadsheets don't have any
Seven.
calculation abilities.
Year one is 7.5 million.
Okay. And I've got 2 and 3 here coming right up.
15 million the second year.
And then almost, I mean, I don't know. I'm taking swags here on what kind of market share. Let's
37.5 is year three.
Let's maybe we'll back that off to a more, say,
Yeah.
1/5. I don't know. That's probably even very optimistic, but you understand what we're doing. We're kind of just looking at potentials, right? So
Well,
say it's
the funders want to see a nice little ramp.
They
that's
want
right.
and yeah, and it's a little more complicated because there's going to be a new product every 9 months.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So
So so that's the fun part. So now let's go back to the work that's required. And I mean, really considering where we're at with this device, now if we went with the existing device and we didn't try to go for tensioning, oh, and along the lines of tensioning, for MPFL, there is tensioning is important, but what the surgeons typically do, and Bob, just tell me what you think of this. They set up their graft, they attach the graft to the patella, and then at the time they insert the fixation into the femur, they said, they pull the patella over a little bit so that when the fixation goes in, it sort of lands in the right spot in the end. And I mean, they made it look so easy. I almost feel like graft tensioning would kind of be overkill in this. But what do you think, Bob?
Yeah, it's a very different concept than an MCL, ACL, other ligaments in the body. We make them tight, and usually we worry that you're going to have a decay in the tension that you have at time zero. But an MPFL is a check brain, so you don't want it over tension at all. Otherwise, you sublux the patella immediately, and it's not a good outcome at all. So it's a bit unique in getting the right tension. So we often translate the patella a little bit laterally while we fix it on the medial side, so you don't over tension it. Other people do the fixation in full flexion so that they make sure that because the ligaments is you make sure there's not over tension in that position. So there's different ways of making sure you don't over tension it, but if you could titrate the tension, that would be great. Like where you could, slowly add some tension and then say, okay, that's perfect, stop.
Like a zip tie.
Yeah.
Yes. So with typical interference screws, if you put a graft into the femur and then you advance, sometimes just the advancement of the screw drags more graft in, and you're tensioning it while you're advancing your fixation point, which isn't ideal. So it'd be nice if you could avoid that issue where you can titrate the tensioning.
Could you tension on the other side, on the patellar side?
You could if you want to. I think most people make that the static point, and the adjustable really on the femoral side. I would say that's almost everyone.
Because you have the tunnel to deal with to help you on the femoral side. You can pull the graft further into the tunnel, whereas on the patella side, you're just snagging it up against the patella.
Yeah, you have fixed points. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, so that's a question. I mean, if in my opinion, if we had to add a whole bunch of development to allow tensioning, that would make it a different project because, like Bob said, they literally just, they either sublux or they either flex the knee or they just move the patella over like a few millimeters and then put the fixation in and it ends up where they want it to be. It's not that critical. But but now's the time you have to decide, what the requirements are going to be, or at the beginning of a project. But if tensioning is not required, you still can tension. You just can't really titrate the tension after you apply the fixation, unless we go down like a little bit different path. So, kind of some standard steps in development. We complete the implant instrument and packaging designs. I think last time we talked, I mentioned that the smallest version of this fixation we did was 7 millimeter diameter screw. I don't think it's going to be a huge technical leap to go down to 6, and 6 does seem to be a fairly well accepted size. The Smith and Nephew surgical technique guide says 6 millimeters, and the two demonstrations I saw at this lab said 6 millimeters, and it, I don't think that's a huge question.
There's the part of the patient population is probably teenage girls. So does 6 still work for, 14-year-old soccer player?
That's a good question. What do you think, Bob?
I think you have to consider skeletal maturity. So if you're getting into 14, are they mature or not? Because you sometimes have to work around the medial physis. So systems that allow you to be all physeal so you can stay away from growth plate, I think are important. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes
Yep.
so. And the physis can be really close to running out, right, at age 14, something like that.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's near the distal femur. I mean, it's getting pretty close.
Yeah. 14 is when they start going. Not all males. Males sometimes are delayed, but
Right. Interesting. That's a really important piece. We can't touch the physis.
And along those lines, the standard procedure is to run a guide pin all the way through the tibia to pull the graft into the tunnel. And I've been thinking all along, like, why don't we use like a forked guide pin and push the graft into the tunnel and then apply the fixation from the medial side and just not go all the way through. In this demonstration, I just saw one surgeon did an MPFL, and then the next surgeon did a distal femoral osteotomy. And as he was drilling the guide pins in, he wrapped around the sutures that were still just hanging out in there from the MPFL repair. And it got to the point where it stopped his drill. And we could talk more about that later, Bob, but I mean, I think it'd be possible to apply fixation without going all the way through the femur.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I have some thoughts on it, Kelly. I'm not even sure you need graft in the tunnel. I think it can be onlay. Essentially, the implant can be obviously in the bone, but the your graft can end at the orifice of your of where
Yeah.
your implant goes in, and that
Yeah.
was using the eyelet concept or the zip tie concept, because you don't, Scott Rodeo has shown grafts heal quite nicely to the surface of bone. Healing inside a tunnel is not necessary. So as much as we jam tissue inside tunnels, all the healing occurs right at the mouth of the tunnel.
Yep.
Cortex. Yep.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I've liked that idea of I think Bob in the past we've called it the graft tether, where maybe we make a little countersink in the bone and then you pull the graft down onto the bone. Um, I don't know, that could also be running into some regulatory hurdles, approval on a device that's not a suture anchor and it's not an interference screw. But anyway, I don't want to be a naysayer. So
Kelly, there's also an iterative process to this, right? We come out with the basic repair, and then we modify it.
Yep, exactly.
It's incremental innovation.
Absolutely. Yep. If we can go, well, you heard me say it already, but I think it'd just be a really straightforward project to use something close to the original, the current design, and then follow on with, a tensionable eyelet type design. And then we'd be in the territory of, something, a whole new platform for soft tissue repair.
Yep.
So, some standard steps here: completing the design, submitting any new additional patent applications, which again, if we go with the straightforward direct path, I don't even think we're going to need to submit any new IP. Build prototypes, implant and instrument prototypes, conduct biomechanical testing, do our cadaveric verification, validation testing. And then we'd need sterilization validation for the single-use kit and a shipping and packaging validation. And that would be, the major steps that would lead then to a 510(k) submission.
I would put 510(k) submission after cadaveric testing.
Okay.
Because what they're going to want is the benchtop data, and you can do a promissory note saying you're going to complete, obviously, the sterilization and packaging validation and put it in. So, when you get audited, it has to be there. You can't go to market without it, but you actually don't need it for the 510(k) submission.
Okay.
And for how long a submission could take, it'd be nice to run the submission in parallel with the V&V for sterilization and shipping, packaging.
Chris, what I've kind of seen recently with one of the clients I've been working with is that FDA has come back asking for validations within 30 days, during the AI process.
Okay.
For sterilization. So I know it's hit and miss, but again, just from a planning standpoint, I would kind of consider that as something to keep that in mind from a risk standpoint.
Okay.
Then I would add between 2 and 3 is choose contract manufacturer. That's actually more work than you think.
Yep.
Yeah.
I know it is. I have found, recently that even just getting quotes from contract manufacturers, they'll sign an NDA, they'll look at your designs, and then you never hear from them again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are they just in the business of taking your designs to
No. They just get
companies?
They get really big orders from their big customers, and they ignore all new products. That's what's going on.
I mean, it's a bit of a problem.
It's a huge problem. You get kicked to the back of the line. And a lot of these CMs are being vertically integrated, right?
Yep.
So that they can attract the really large OEMs. And I mean, I think there's a huge opportunity going back to kind of the boutique contract manufacturing, focusing on small companies.
So I have just one more thought, just from a risk standpoint. if we're going with the sterile route, right, and if there's any changes to the design, or let's say if we go into a launch and then we find out that we have to make changes, I would add a significant amount of change. If that significant amount of changes, then that would pretty much like we have to redo all the sterilization, packaging, and everything, right? That's a lot of
Hmm.
cost and time.
Yeah.
Would you kind of consider, should we kind of consider a non-sterile route for an initial launch before with the peers, only like a small launch, and as we are kind of validating the packaging, that would be a quicker route to market. We may be able to generate some data and some sales, and then iron out all the kinks and go into sterilization. So that's a two-step process, but it
Yeah.
will
I mean, you still have to
the
do
cost.
sterilization validation with a non-sterile
Yeah,
product, but
yeah,
but we wouldn't have to design the
yeah,
packaging and go through all the
You
packaging
could just pouch
definition.
it, right? So,
yeah, exactly. Could pouch
yeah,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something to
I
think about.
I absolutely love that idea. I mean,
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's a fantastic idea.
yeah, yeah,
Is do the first 50 cases with reusable, right?
Yeah.
And get the instrumentation nailed down, like the guide, for example. And then go for the for the kitted approach. I think that's a fantastic suggestion, Dinesh.
All right, thanks a
yeah.
lot.
Most
Yeah,
That's one of the big Achilles heels of startups is they think their first design is perfect and it
Yep.
never is. And it's hard to recover from, you do a year's worth of work, you
Yep.
know, and with the perfect design and the FDA and packaging, and then you go, whoops, we got to redesign everything.
Yeah, that's right.
Yep.
And you can just put everything in a disposable pouch and
Yep.
then just do a steam sterilization validation
I love it.
and be perfectly valid.
Hey,
yeah, and some contract manufacturers actually have a pre-validated steam sterilization process. Like one of the companies I work with, it's called, you probably heard the name BioPro.
Hmm.
They used to make implants. They still do, but they're also contract manufacturers. They work with some startups where you can actually adopt into their worst case sterilization. So you don't have to even spend that $25,000-$30,000 in doing the steam sterilization validation. So there are some contract manufacturers like that that we can probably explore.
excellent.
Okay.
Hey, Bob, what's the custom landscape in Canada? Can you do 1 to 5 procedures before you get regulatory clearance with a prescription? I have no idea.
We have a pathway called Special Access through Health Canada, which generally is for new technology that doesn't have a predicate. So you kind of say there isn't anything else that I could use. So it's a little hard to do when it's just a Me Too type implant.
Yeah, got it. Well, maybe it's not a suture, and it's maybe we can call it something different for Canada, and then say it's just like a predicate when we talk to the FDA. I don't know.
Well, so is
Yeah.
Canada more similar to Europe, where they call these high strength sutures artificial tendons? Because in Europe, we would want to package this very differently and not preload any of the anchors with suture because you get paid a lot more for high strength suture in Europe because
Huh.
they call it an artificial tendon versus a suture.
Hmm.
Is Canada the same way?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't think so. I think we're probably a little more aligned with FDA.
Okay. Okay.
It makes sense.
All right. Good discussion, good suggestions on some steps in there that we could do to streamline activities and get into cases sooner.
Hmm.
Um, Again, I took some swags at these steps. Um, and again, this is all just kind of unverified numbers, but again, the beauty of MPFL over a complete ACL kit is, I think, the low kind of startup cost, the low cost of prototyping and making pilot inventory. So, I mean, I'm thinking the project is under $1 million to get on the market for MPFL because we'd have fewer sizes.
Hmm.
and it's especially non-sterile kit. You don't have to make permanent tooling.
Right.
It seems like the design 200,000 for design seems really high. If it's mostly just CAD work and printing,
Does it seem high?
it does.
Because I'm just thinking we have, well, I was thinking we'd probably be doing a disposable driver, which I guess we maybe wouldn't
Yeah,
be.
I mean, instrumentation
Um,
design's expensive.
yeah.
I mean, I'm just thinking CAD. Is that just CAD work? Because build prototypes is 180,000.
Yeah. I mean, if you have a SKU, like we can build a SKU, we can probably kind of come up with a closer estimate.
If we had a what?
If we build a SKU set for like what's going to be all the
Oh,
Yeah.
the kit build material, that'll give us a good idea of cost breakdown.
Yeah, we need to itemize is it 5 parts? Is it 10 parts?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
would be
yeah.
a great build material.
Yeah, and I don't have that laid out here. I apologize. This is a little bit high level
Yeah.
A lot of information. Yeah.
yeah.
Seems like
And then again, the design is probably completely dependent on, if we choose which of these routes we choose. Again, I would just strongly advocate choosing the current design.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I could see that going up, a lot more. We just have so much history on making this design, using it in cadaveric setting. And I think if we go to this adjustable tensioned eyelet design, which I love the idea of, and we actually have patent protection on that already, but I could see that number going up significantly because, we're gonna need to do another 5 to 10 cadaver labs,
yeah.
design iterations.
Yeah.
Phase two.
Um,
Yeah, we got to go with what we got for phase one.
Yeah.
Looks like biomechanical testing is a little shy. It's going to be more than 25.
okay.
And sterilization validation, that seems low also.
Right.
Um, Shipping, packing, that's the shake and bake test, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, the shake and bake. I don't even know. I haven't done those in a long time, but maybe it's
I don't know, just yeah, I would take money out of the design and add it to the testing and validation.
Yeah, and again, this is all like if you're doing sterilization validation, that is all like if you're going sterile route, right?
Right.
And then in that we'll also have to include the packaging development, like the tray design. If you're doing sterilization, sterile product, you also need to account for the packaging design.
Yeah. Yeah. You mean for the kid?
Yeah, if it's a disposable, yeah, correct. If it's kit,
Yeah.
but if it's
And we have to
not
do.
sterile, right? Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, no, no, yeah. I'm just trying to, the strategy being, the first one we're gonna have to do if we do the reusable route first, we're gonna have to do, just the sterilization for the implants, and then we're gonna have to do a second one for the kit.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's two projects. I'd like to see you do project costs
for both.
non-sterile and then sterile, right after it, or
Yeah.
they probably overlap,
Yeah, in parallel, yeah, yeah.
Yep. I like that too. I mean, well, and plus, I mean, we're running up against investor interest. They're probably not interested in a $500,000 project. If we can show them the pipeline of non-sterile product, sterile product, and then, I think ACL could also be included because when you get approval for a range of sizes of something, the size used for MPFL is the worst case size.
Yeah,
It's the smallest one. So you don't even have to do additional testing to get 7, 8, 9, 10 millimeter devices cleared.
yeah, yeah,
Good point.
But
And
yeah,
maybe you could bracket when you submit, maybe you could bracket the smallest and largest or something.
yeah.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's looks reasonable.
Yeah.
All these numbers.
Yeah, but I'm happy to look at the numbers in more detail and then look at reusable and single use like side by side.
Yeah, I think reusable and then single use side by side with a layer of ACL on top, and then you can layer in, you know, all the fun stuff, all
Yeah,
the all the additional costs of starting and running a company, right? So,
yeah.
at first blush, it's probably a $5 to $7 million raise.
Yeah.
hmm And then we already had our fun with that slide.
The great thing about this is it can be run super lean, right? Because
I
everything,
think
we're
so.
outsourcing it. We're not gonna, no clean room, no none of that, right? Use contract manufacturers and just keep the SG&A super lean.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
We
absolutely.
also need to find the suture vendors, right? Basically, like who would be those
Oh, I
players?
know. I know the best one by far. It's River Point Medical.
A River Point is fantastic. They are
Yep,
super, super
yep.
expensive.
They
Have
Oh,
you
are
are.
heard
they?
of MZF4?
Mazafaro?
Mazzaferro, yeah.
Yep. There's another one other than River Point. I talked to them both at the AAOS this year. I think it was River Point that I kind of got the best impression from, but there was two of them there.
Yeah, they're the
Um,
old CP Medical guys, right? So they sold CP Medical and literally opened downstairs, took everyone and opened
oh, okay.
opened
Wow.
River Point. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah,
So yeah, we would need
I
a
know some of the guys
supplier.
over there. But River Point is they sold, I think, a majority share to a Canadian
PE firm. Yeah.
PE firm. Yeah. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't think their pricing is gonna get any better. I mean,
Right.
Mazzafaro
The
might
good
be
news,
fun.
the good news about River Point is they invested in a huge R&D facility, so
Yeah,
they don't have a problem doing pilot programs
right.
like
Right.
like some of the other suture companies. And the dirty little secret is they make sutures for everybody in the whole world. Just
Yeah.
nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't.
I mean, so we're not making anything new with the sutures, right? We're not trying to come up with a new binding
No
or
new
anything.
tape.
No.
Right.
No,
No,
off the
this
shelf.
would be really straightforward from a suture standpoint because it's really a basic, I'm envisioning, unless, someone determines otherwise, a basic suture anchor with the sutures, departing from the anchor, and you just tie the graft to the patella.
Hmm.
That's how they demonstrated in all the surgical technique guides, and there's nothing fancy. Bob, would you agree with that?
Yeah, that's been the standard for a while. I think Knotless is the only sort of new kit, which is really a big advantage. It's just like a
Yeah.
little slicker, but more expensive for sure.
Yeah. Knotless that would be something to consider. And River Point for sure could do that. I think that's what most people are going to them and asking them to do is, do our knotless suture anchor, our knotless backup plate, that kind of stuff.
Are we saying knotless or are we saying all suture anchor?
Knotless.
Okay.
So it'd still be a plastic suture anchor. I mean, it could be
They,
an
they,
all
the
suture
move is
anchor
towards
also.
all suture-based knotless is where everything's going. So Smith and Nephew, that's the Q-Fix platform. Arthrex has its platform, FiberTac. So there's pretty much every company's going to all suture-based. So I don't know how much IP is there. My sense is the IP was actually pretty loose when you look back at Juggernaut and those original players that there isn't a lot of IP on all suture-based anchors.
Bob, there's actually a ton.
Yeah. And I would just keep us
I,
aware
no,
of,
I get that, but they're easy to kind of work around. Is my point. That's why everyone has their own platform. They didn't all have to acquire Juggernaut.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Well,
you can also pay the licensing fee
yeah.
yeah.
And those are good things to consider. I think we'd have to be aware of scope creep
Yeah,
because you
simplicity
can
sake.
easily say, wouldn't this be neat? And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden it just changes the scope of everything.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure.
So I think so knotless is usually like a suture and then like a Chinese finger trap suture, and one suture goes through a like a tubular shape in the other suit in itself, and then you
Yeah.
pull on the two ends, and the outer sheath of suture grabs onto the inner sheath to the inner suture and just kind of locks it into place. That probably wouldn't be a huge amount of scope creep, but if we get into all suture based fixation, I would be leery of how much design effort and patent workarounding that's going to take.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I don't
I guess
disagree.
we're kind of
I
out
don't
of
disagree.
time. Any questions or any other comments or thoughts?
No, I think it's a good start. I mean, getting the layer development, for the reusable, then kitted, and then throwing the ACL on top of that. If
Okay.
ACL is the next one, I mean, you could also do, biceps tendon, throw that in there, what that might look like, because that's not a huge departure, right?
Well, and Bob, like Bob mentioned last week, biceps tendon is going to almost all suture anchor.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
Interference screws they're moving away from in biceps tendon because of potential for fractures
Yeah. Yeah.
after the healing process. Is there
Yeah.
anything you can say, like, do you see any prospects, any folks who, like, how's it looking from the standpoint of, could we pitch this to someone who is really interested? Is there anything you can say about that at this point, or is it too early?
I think it's a little early. I mean,
Yeah.
uh,
Okay. Fair
for
enough.
for better or worse, I mean, the kind of dollars we're looking to raise are traditional. And I say traditional, not what historically has been known as VC, but they're all putting their risk out later, and they want to see a couple million top line. So this is going to be, educated, early stage angels and or family office type investment. Now that being said, the the that's it's getting a lot more developed as far as how you reach out to those people, and lists of them. It's not as tribal knowledge. So
Yeah.
I don't think it would be difficult to get a once we get this nailed down, get a list of 25 to 50 that we go to initially, and at least get a sense of their feedback and responses and interest in this space. It's going to really help the fact that the sports medicine market is focusing on NPFL, because what that says is, okay, if you come out with a good system, one of the larger OEMs is going to snap you up, and you're not going to have to live too long
Hmm.
on
Hmm.
trying to,
Hmm.
establish a market.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
The timing is good.
Yeah.
We need a story. We need to refine the story. We need a business case.
Yeah.
That, yep.
Okay. All right.
This is this
Cool.
is great. This is a really good start. It's very high level, but it's really good start. What do we need to do before the next week or two?
Well, uh, what would you guys like to see? You know,
You know,
I
probably
could re I could refine these numbers and do what we said we were going to do, look at reusable and single use side by side.
Yep.
Um, um,
Well, the good thing is too that you have some prototypes and test data already.
yeah.
So it's credible, right? You at least have some form of the design that you can
Yep.
demonstrate and show. That's helpful. It's not all in theory. Um, and then I think refining the market numbers, and just being able to pass the red face test when it comes to it, the total addressable market and the growth rate of that market and what we intend to get as market share in the first 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think part of the story is you've been working on this for 10 years.
Yeah.
There's lots of strong IP, but you
Yep.
haven't pulled the trigger because the market wasn't ready for it yet.
Yeah.
And now the market's ready.
Yep.
Yep. And that is, I really think that's a true statement. When I started talking to people about, I pitched this initially as an anatomic ACL repair system, and I don't think that's what people wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And I'm even moving away from that anatomical pitch and saying, it's a device that has its own set of features and benefits. And if they want to use it to create an anatomic repair, then so be it.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think also the problem with ACL is everyone just thinks it's such a saturated market and there can't be any innovation in it and blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
Targeting MPFL, oh, that's new. Physicians are focused on that and all
Yeah.
that fun stuff. It's a little sexier.
Yep. Do you want to meet again in 1 week or 2 weeks?
Yeah, I always like to go faster, but if you need more time,
Oh, let's see. Let's try 1 week. I think 1 week sounds good to me because the side-by-side comparison and some of these other things I'm going to check into, I don't think are going to require a ton of heavy lifting. So let's say 1 week, and I think my availability next Tuesday will be pretty good.
okay, so we're gonna do 5 o'clock on the 8th, same time.
Okay. Another thing we should probably start considering now, also is, Bob kind of defining if we're going to go the reusable route for the first 50 procedures, who is that? And are they going to have any thoughts or input, from a design standpoint? So maybe identify 5 to 10 physicians that we would initially go to once funded to say, hey, this is, or even before, get their interest level and say, hey, we're thinking about doing this. Are you in, as we move this forward?
Yep.
That would be helpful.
One of the surgeon advisors on this was Dr. Akbar Nawab from Louisville, Kentucky. And I know you know him, right, Chris?
I've met him a couple of times. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he did a fair amount of help with some of the projects like Helicoil.
Yeah.
And he could do this procedure very well.
Yeah.
But I know, well, I don't want to speak for him, but he's been a little bit out of touch for a little while. And I'm not sure where he stands. I know he started doing a lot of consulting that might have created a conflict
Yeah,
for
he
him.
might be
So
conflicted.
I'm not sure he's totally available at this point. If he were, he could probably be helpful, especially for US cases.
Yeah. And Riley Williams as well.
Is that the HSS guy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Our former
Yeah.
HSS.
Yeah,
I don't
he'd
know if
be
he's
great.
still there.
Let me share a little philosophy. I like surgeons that are going to be very critical on the early.
Yeah.
I want people to say your baby's ugly, this needs to change. And then once the design's frozen, then you go out and get the big time KOLs, I think, that are going to talk about it at the podium. I think it's two different
Well,
groups.
I think that's a good reason to talk to, was it Randy Williams?
Riley Williams.
Riley?
Yep.
Okay. Because, someone who hasn't seen it before would
Yeah.
say, your baby's ugly, or hey,
Yeah.
I can see some real benefits
Yeah.
to using this.
Assuming he's not conflicted.
True.
Might be, but yeah, I think it's worth, to Tiger's point, getting some real critical feedback
Yeah.
early. And, if their feedback is valid and useful, then when we get the product, finalized, they can go pound the table for us. They can be the same. Similar to Tiger's philosophy, I believe in being very critical early on, and then, then you have buy-in from those guys. I'm not going to ever go to rodeo and ask him to sell something for me because he's pounding he's in one lecture hall and then you go to the next lecture hall and he's pounding the table for something else, right? And there's a certain credibility issue there, but
I'm happy to help you with that group. I think there's a lot of there's a whole entire telethermal study group. There's a lot of talented young people that I'm sure would be willing to they'd be hungry and not conflicted at this stage.
Yeah, young and hungry. Perfect, Bob. Yep.
Yeah, I like it. All right.
Cool.
Well, we'll talk again in 7 days.
Sounds good, everyone. Thank you all very much.
Good work. Good work.
Right.
Thanks, Bob, for joining us on the road.
Yep.
Good talking to you guys.
Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.